We could have done it so much better if we were going to regulate. We could have kept the felony. We could have kept the hard penalties for illegal growing, whether it was public land, private land, environmental, damage, things like that. But we basically incentivized the cartels. We incentivized the black market. And one of the jobs I had as being the lieutenant and the team leader of the marijuana enforcement team, our first tactical unit developed in 2013, as you know, just to fight this problem. I mean, we took game wardens out of the field with either special operations, military experience, or law enforcement experience, and we stopped doing traditional patrol. And the 12 of us basically were just targeting these grow sites, these cartel groups, trespass mostly on public lands. From 2013, I retired in 2018. That team is still running and ripping heavy. They're not slowing down. And now we're looking at cannabis black markets being so bad on the illegal cartel side that almost 100 game wardens out of 450 in California are dedicated just to cannabis enforcement. I mean, wow. Who would have thought, would you have ever imagined, would I have ever imagined being a game warden, brother, that would be a major environmental crime focus that we would have to put our efforts into? But we have to, and here we are. It's that adaptability, right? Fill and flowing to the environmental destruction and what enemy we're fighting now. And quite honestly, I think we're fighting the most violent and the most inhumane and the most, just profit-driven criminal that I've ever came across in my career, and certainly that have kind of the same mindset of the enemy you fought overseas, valiantly in the GWAT. In the global war on terror. I mean, I see some of this viciousness in these guys in grows that we've had to fight. And to think that it's in our backyard in the Silicon Valley foothills, just to name one spot across the country, is mind-blowing.
It truly is. Let's hop in the time machine here a little bit. Walk me through your origin story, how you became a game warden, and then how the marijuana enforcement team came to be.
Yeah, the game warden thing of getting into that career was, I consider it, kind of a little bit of divine intervention, because as much as I was learning to hunt, fish, be a conservationist, I mean, my dad, my grandfather, my uncles, we were embedded conservationists. My dad was, an expert waterfowl hunter. He was a state champion in California for trap and skeet, an excellent shot with anything he put his hands on in the firearm realm. So, and my grandfather instilled that. My grandfather was career Navy. Right out of basic, deployed in Pearl Harbor, was on a cruiser that got hammered, survived that, did a 20-year career, knowing that he would eventually, keep his whole family together, either in California or Oregon, and now in northwestern Montana, finding a garden spot for hunting, fishing, and just quality of life that we in the conservation world, both of us on this conversation share. So it came at an early age, and it was definitely a passion. I mean, I harvested my first waterfowl. It was a cinnamon teal of all things with my mom's 20 gauge shotgun at 9 years old, and dad kind of helped me go through hunter ed because I couldn't quite understand all the questions, and I passed the thing fortunately. And so when I started the Fish and Wildlife Academy at Napa Valley College in 1992, I had never met a game warden until 2 years before that. Usually, if you're hunting and fishing all over the state of California, brother, you're going to run into a game warden at some point. They're going to check you hunting. They're going to check your license fishing. You're going to see them at a checkpoint for animals. I don't know how that didn't happen, but it didn't happen. So I was actually going the direction of an engineering career at San Jose State. I was also looking at the ROTC program to look at a special forces bill and do an engineering, degree on top of that. And I was one semester into a civil engineering program when I was on a winter break from that first semester, and me and one of my best friends I grew up with had actually taught me to backpack, took me into Henry Coast State Park in those foothills just east of where you grew up and right above my house, and fell in love with it. And so there we were on winter break right after doing winter finals, one pack horse, me and Jeff, and we're going to go into Co Park in the middle of a week of rain for Christmas holiday. No one's in the park, just a bunch of dumb kids getting soaked with bad equipment. We didn't have the gear right. And 13 miles into the backcountry at a lake, at a little horse camp, the next morning, we found this lake in the middle of the night. We made it. Our stuff was soaked. We had a fire. Didn't realize it was an illegal fire, but we had to dry our stuff out. Stuff was a mess. And so, dude, the next morning, about 10 a.m., here comes this 4x4 truck, all green and compound low, grinding down the hill right on top of us. And I thought, oh, man, that's a park ranger. We just registered with Barry back at headquarters last night, and they're probably checking on us, and we got a fire. I don't think we can have it. This is not a good thing. And it wasn't. It was a game warden. And it was a game warden that was back there looking for black-tailed deer poachers in deep rut because that's an area where after season is over, these monster blacktail bucks are all over kind of that central area. He realized we were just some dumb college kids. We were backpacking in an area and a time we probably shouldn't have been, and was about to leave. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. And, my eyes lit up. Obviously, my wheels were spinning. What exactly do you do? Who do you report to? What type of law enforcement do you do? You work out of that truck. You don't have backup. You don't go to an office. You take that truck home. You have an office at home. That's kind of your steel horse you ride. I was blown away. And I went, that's what I need to be doing. That's what I need to be doing. I'm doing the wrong thing. And so I was all whipped up and adrenalized that whole 5 days. And the second I got out of Co-Park, I went and talked to the criminal justice advisor. I'll never forget him, Professor Murder. He was a mass murder, serial murder expert instructor, Mike Rustigan, in the criminal justice program. And I said, Mike, how do I become a game warden? What degree do I need to get? He said, this is it. Military guys, we got a lot of stuff going on, FBI, DEA, local police. We place game wardens, and they happen to be one of the best criminal justice programs in the country. So I was very fortuitous that I didn't miss any time and switch majors, and I was off to the races.
When did the Warden Service create the marijuana enforcement team? Because honestly, until we had our first conversation years ago, I would not have connected the two. You think game warden, you're like, check, you're out there and you're doing the things that you described. You're encountering people, checking their game, checking their licenses, and then we talked for hours before about these illegal grows. It's not that it doesn't diverge because you're still talking about the outdoors and the ecosystem and all that, but it's just not something I naturally would have connected.
One thing that was happening with several of us in the agency, and some of our guys were, coming on board that, had been on the SEAL teams for 20 years. They were going to do another job. They really liked the outdoors. So we had a SEAL veteran that was becoming a game warden late in his career after doing some DOJ time. A lot of us were integrating with domestic law enforcement tactical units and getting training and going to SWAT schools, sniper schools, operator schools, whatever, tactical tracking, because we had an affinity for it, for one, and we wanted to improve our skill set. We wanted to diversify our capabilities as game wardens. But what we also knew is we knew at some point, somehow, game wardens aren't just doing game warden work. We're doing fugitive recovery. We're running across murder suspects on the run in the woods. We operate really effectively in the woods because it's our backyard. And, just the whole world was getting crazier and criminality was getting more violent. And we also knew with sheriff's deputies, police, federal agencies being very depleted and stretched in many more places, we were going to start working together as a force multiplier, active shooter situations as one, school takeover, school shootings, things like that. Columbine had happened. Everybody was ramping up, and game wardens were starting to be seen as legitimate law enforcement, not just the, outdoor bird and bunny cops, so to speak, right? And we wanted to improve our sets. And in the Silicon Valley, we have a lot of tier 1 teams, and Sacramento, and we got to embed with those guys, be accepted, perform well, and become part of their teams. And so we started working illegal cartel cannabis grows way back in 2004, because I actually found one in my backyard right below Co-Park. And in my first book, War in the Woods, the first chapter goes into how this whole thing started. I certainly didn't anticipate doing, the same thing you said, is this doesn't add up. Game wardens and a game warden tactical unit, and you're fighting cartels. We didn't know that enemy was even there yet. And my buddy that grew up with the family, and now he's in grad school at San Jose State, he's a fisheries biologist, but a very savvy outdoorsman. And he's doing like a 5-year study for his master's thesis on red-legged, yellow-legged frog, steelhead trout, all of these threatened and endangered species that are using these pristine waterways. It's late April. It's 2004, and he calls me up and says, dude, something's up. I got 2 creeks that I'm studying for all of these species over longevity, for habitat, quality, water quality, and pollution and things like that. One creek just suddenly went bone dry. There's a bunch of plastic and debris washed up at the bottom, where this thing trickles out by the road, and everything's dead. The fish have spawned, but the fry are dead. The frogs are dead. Someone's diverting water up top. It's a massive impact. These are federally and state listed threatened species. So there's some criminality involved and wildlife loss. So I said, all right, jump in the truck. I'll meet you. We're going to go to the top. You know the area better than I do. We're going to dive into the canyon. Let's go check it out. So we do. And, I've got my AR, I've got my pack, I've got my radio, cell phone, all my police equipment. But I have no cell coverage and I have no radio coverage. It's that remote, steep, dark canyon. My buddy, call sign GI in the book, He's unarmed, but he's my bird dog, and he's got fieldcraft. He's very savvy in the woods. He hunts, he fishes, and all that, and he lives out there. And we creep down to the bottom of this canyon, get into a real pristine creek with big, little waterfalls and inlets. Just a beautiful, beautiful stretch like you'd see over on the coast in Santa Cruz, the redwood forests. And we find the diversion. We find visqueen plastic. We find the creek completely blocked and dry, and then a water line from the creek going downstream, being used for something. I'm like, this doesn't make sense, man. I expect to see like a cattle rancher diverting it for cattle, or somebody building something illegally like a structure. Had never seen anything like that. And so, we stayed a little savvy. Things were a little weird in there. It was really quiet. We didn't know what we were going up into. So we moved quietly and worked down the creek very slowly, and used cover and concealment. And then we saw them. We saw two growers in green BDUs with SKSs or AK-47s, machetes. There were two of them, and they looked completely foreign to anything I would have ever seen in my woods up to that point. They looked more like a Sandinista crew running around in Nicaragua in the jungle. It was crazy. And what was really crazy was the amount of fieldcraft and stealth they were executing. They were quiet. They whispered. The guy behind the point guy would occasionally look over his left shoulder and check behind him. He'd do what our tail gunners do on our tactical units, and that you did on the teams. They were always had their heads on a swivel. They were always, even when they were talking, they were looking around slowly. They weren't making sudden movements. They were ghosts. And I went, okay, this is a whole new wildlife enemy, man. This is crazy. Who are these guys?